You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are well. So this week's show is one that is near and dear to my heart. It is about burnout, which is something I dance around the edges of a lot in pretty much every aspect of my life. I love doing this show, but I'll tell you, there are many times where the pressure I feel to do a good job here and to do a good job on my newsletter and a good job on the book projects I'm working on and a good job still riding my bike and running and literally walking my talk, all on top of wanting to show up in my personal life, and all while navigating the social media space where everyone seems to be yelling at each other and taking shots at each other around the clock. There are many days that I feel like throwing it all in the ocean and riding off into the sunset, where I'm not sure I can do it anymore. And if I'm honest, as I record this, I'm sitting high up on the precarious edge of one of those times when it all just feels like too much. And thankfully, I have been here enough times that I know the questions to ask myself as I sit on this edge about how I'm taking care of myself, about my why, and if that why or those whys have changed, and if so, what are they now? And what's real, and what are the stories that are being played out in my very, very rich theater of my mind? And I'm able to gently walk back from the edge and find my way again. But it's been a process for me. It's always been a process for me, and I imagine it always will be a process for me. Because as a goal-oriented person, I'm always pushing out the goalposts and raising the bar and seeing what's possible until it comes close to breaking me. And I know I need to reevaluate that process too, because I keep thinking one of these times that it just might break me. And that's not what life is really about either. And that's all a really long ass way of saying that I am so grateful for this week's guest, Erin Ayala, who is a licensed psychologist and certified mental performance consultant and friend of the show, as well as an endurance athlete who runs her own business, for coming in and talking all about that this week, because Erin gets it. She understands women like us. She understands what perimenopause and menopause can do to our identity and our performance, and how stress and life and hormones and expectations and brain chemistry can all conspire to leave us wanting to throw in the towel or bury ourselves in the bed sheets for a few days. And this week, we just unpack it all. We unravel burnout in midlife women, what it is, how it shows up, how it overlaps with perimenopause and mood changes and maybe depression, and how to tell it apart from being overreached, underfueled, or just end of season tired. Erin also serves up some practical advice for what to do when every workout feels like a slog, how to talk to your coach, why rest, recovery, and carbs matter more than ever, maybe, and how to build a support team that actually communicates with each other. We also dig into the hard stuff, like the grief of changing performance and body composition in midlife, and how to pivot without losing your identity as an athlete. I really hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. All right, before we get into it, give us a follow at Feisty Menopause at Instagram and Facebook. Head into the show notes and sign up for my free weekly Feisty 40 Plus newsletter with all the training news you can use. Thanks as always for your kind ratings and reviews. We're 5 away from 700 ratings on Apple Podcasts, and I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And a very, very quick Before we get to it, quick thanks to Previnex for their longtime support. I got this amazing review from Simi on their Joint Health Plus product, and I just wanted to share that really quickly. She says, I was suffering from very consistent piriformis issue that was not going away. I tried exercising, not exercising, stretching, resting, magnesium, positive visualization, everything. Then I decided to try Joint Health Plus, and weirdly and miraculously, the pain went away. I didn't really believe it worked that easily. I mean, how could it? There's usually no magic pill for chronic back pain, and I didn't find a way to breathe out my anxiety and stress, but there it is. It worked, and I am so damn grateful. Me too, Simi. Me too. And with that, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right, Erin, welcome back. It's been a minute.
It has. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a good one.
This is a good one. And it came up through the Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group. And it's interesting because it's something that I have felt myself on and off. I think everybody has, right? In some
Yeah.
capacity, whether personal or professional or athletically or all of the above. And it was about burnout and what do you do if you're burned out, which led us to think, well, how do you know if it's burnout? Like, what does that even,
Mm-hmm.
right? What does that even mean? And I think like the big picture questions are how do you tell if you're burned out? What causes it? And then how do you treat and prevent it? But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to cover here. So what are your initial thoughts here?
Mm-hmm. My initial thoughts that this is a hugely, I don't know how to phrase this, not overlooked in the sense that there isn't a lot of research on when you look at the research on athletic burnout. This won't be surprising for folks listening. Much of it is done on collegiate athletes or men.
Hmm.
They're not, there's not a lot, there's some, but there's not a lot on like recreational athletes, let alone midlife women. And so my main thought is we need to have very special conversations about midlife women and burnout because of the overlapping symptoms with
Mm.
perimenopause. And then there's also this added layer of depression.
Oh,
And so
and
we
that can
can
be related too, though.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So with these conversations, I'm so happy that the community reached out and asked for this because it's such an important topic and a lot of women don't even know where to turn. And I would also argue a lot of healthcare providers or performance coaches may not know to ask some of these questions because they may not have the expertise in perimenopause to understand some of these overlaps. And some
Yeah.
symptoms might lend themselves to think someone is burnt out, but it may be because of perimenopausal symptoms. So
Where would I even start then?
yeah. So
Like,
I
where's my
think,
entry point? If I wake up and I'm feeling this way,
uh-huh.
what do I start?
Yeah. So there are some kind of core buckets when we look at athletic burnout. So it's, and it's something that when we think about, this isn't going to be something that you wake up and you just feel off and kind of blah for a day.
Right.
So when we're taking these things into account, it's looking at, how long have you been feeling this way? And I'd also argue a lot of it is pretty normal for athletes, especially, toward the end of the season.
Hmm.
So I've definitely been feeling burnt out. I've felt burnt out toward the end of every season, and we'll talk about some of
Hmm.
the reasons why. But we're looking at physical and mental exhaustion, just feeling super tired and worn out, just over it, just
Yeah.
wiped out. There's a lot of performance related fatigue. And so it can come up in terms of like getting sick of just the logistics of travel and like the whole process and procedure and the equipment and being on the road or sleeping in hotel rooms, so that can be this performance related fatigue. But then also you're not really achieving or performing to your abilities or like what you're used to.
Hmm.
So that can be really big. And for that, I focus a lot on kind of seasonality because again, performance is going to change each year depending on what we have going on in life. But if performance starts to really drop toward the end of the season, that's usually a sign. Um, Another big piece is a decreased sense of accomplishment, kind of like, why am I doing this? Like, it doesn't really matter anymore. My efforts would be better spent elsewhere. So you're just kind of like more indifferent about it. And you really lose that spark or that interest or that passion. So one of the things that kind of like shows up is we'll start to kind of drop the quote unquote little things. So if you're the type of athlete who usually looks at course profiles or you read the race packet beforehand, you're good with the logistics, charging your equipment, getting the course on your bike computer, right? And then all of a sudden you're not really doing those things. That could be another sign that it's a burnout type of thing where you're just losing that motivation and that interest. And then the other thing that's interesting is you kind of get this, we'll see this in the healthcare professions. So for anyone, there's a lot of research on like physicians, nurses, and others in kind of behavioral healthcare providers burnout, the sense of cynicism or skepticism, where it's just kind of like this disillusionment of like, why am I even doing this? Or why am I a part of this community or this, like, what's the purpose? You kind of feel detached or resentful about training, about competition. So that's also a pretty big red flag that something's going on.
And how does that differ from being overreached or stale?
Yeah. Yep. I think there are a lot of overlaps. Being overreached or stale is going to be pretty, I wouldn't say it starts with the physical. And
Okay.
then you're
Okay.
going to have like mental and emotional or psychological symptoms. And then I would also argue like burnout kind of starts with more of the psychological, though you may be like burnt out because of overtraining or overreaching. And that's actually one of, when we look at like treatment and prevention, one of the biggest things, especially for recreational athletes and master athletes, is overtraining can lead to burnout in the same way that it would lead to staleness or like overreaching. Because a lot of midlife women, especially, aren't getting the recovery needed to fully recover from those workouts. And it's just this compounding effect over the course of the season. There's just nothing left in the tank. So,
Yeah,
mhm.
I was gonna ask that because I just did a newsletter on why you should monitor your moods. And it's something that I
Yes,
have done forever because my moods are 100% a canary in the coal mine. Because when
yes,
they start going down, because I'm not a down person, but when they
yep,
start going down, that's an early indicator to me that I need to recover. Honestly,
yep,
like, and that might be food. I mean, I've learned that
hmm
over the years too. Like, just
hmm
actually going out for a good bowl of ramen can really
absolutely,
change
yes,
things. But
yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And so that's, I think, one of the things, and it's tough because especially for, folks who are training for like a marathon or, a long course, triathlon like Ironman, like you don't really have an option to just like, it's different than like 5K runners
mm,
where your fitness and training is a little bit more like flexy. You can pivot more often. You can kind of, you've got more options for race selections, travel logistics. So you can respond more quickly to burnout. For those who train for really large events or traveling, it can get really tricky because then there's this extra layer of like pressure and expectations, which ironically also predicts or can predict burnout.
but
So
you're
one
also
of
going to have periods of misery in there that
absolutely,
don't mean they're burned out, right?
absolutely, yep, yeah, and there will definitely be days or weeks where you're just like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Right. But then usually it'll lift
Does it
after.
resolve when you start? I mean, is there an indicator there? You know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
if I
right.
am, say I'm burned out.
Yep.
Well, actually, let's go back. Say I'm not burned out, but I'm feeling that way. But as soon as
hmm
I get a couple miles in, or as soon as I get something in, the engine's going, my mood's better, I feel okay,
Yep.
then I'm not burned out.
I would
I'm
argue
just
that that's,
riding that
yeah, I would
line.
argue that that's not burnout. If you, once you
Yeah,
kind of get started and then you're
yeah,
like, all right, that was pretty good. Like I didn't
yeah.
really feel like getting moving. Then I'd say you are a typical athlete. That's super, super common, right? Experience
Yeah,
me all the time.
yeah,
If you get going and you just can't find joy or fulfillment and you can't settle in and it just feels like the whole thing is just a slog or a battle,
yeah.
that's more of a sign of a burnout because you're not getting that like sense of satisfaction
Mm,
or fulfillment. Like, difficult workouts are often not going to feel satisfying, but they may feel worthwhile.
yeah.
And so when you start to lose that kind of like, this is worth it, that's a sign that you're trending toward burnout.
Is there a physiological definition underpinning of burnout?
Not to my knowledge.
Hmm.
Yeah. The like everything I've seen is based off of like well, physical exhaustion is the one thing that comes across, but that's more symptom than that
But we
explanation.
don't know if it's like a hormonally driven thing and you know what I mean? Like
Right.
what is driving
We
it?
do know, well, actually, so let me correct myself because we know that stress is a predictor of
Mm.
burnout and it can contribute to burnout. And so, if we're looking at physiological explanations, I would argue if stress levels are too high and recovery is too low, that's the physiological mechanism.
Mm. And
Yeah.
just in sport or in life? Because that was going to be my next question. When you talk about
Yes.
this mood and what is it worth it and this almost
Yep.
nihilism, is it burnout? Uh, is there a border around burnout that's just sport, or does it
Hmm.
bleed into your everyday life? And if it does bleed into your everyday life, is it something else? Is that an indicator that it's something
Yes.
else? Okay.
Great question. Yeah. So burnout is going to be domain specific.
Okay.
So, and what I mean by that is because there's also a lot of research on like occupational health burnout,
Mm-hmm.
for again, like healthcare providers. So physicians, surgeons, right? So that would be like work burnout. They're going to feel that specifically about their work, their career, their occupational choice. Athletes, athletic burnout is also going to be domain specific. So when we start to lose our spark or our interest or this pleasure, but we're feeling it in other areas of life,
Right.
then it's probably that athletic burnout. If we're feeling it in multiple realms, then that's a sign that something else might be brewing, like
Gotcha.
depression or perimenopause, right?
Yeah.
A lot of different overlaps. Mm-hmm.
So sticking to burnout for just a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I'm listening to this and I'm like, I think I am just burned out, I if what do I do? Do I take a couple rest days and eat more? Do I look at my schedule? Like what where am I going with that? Or
Yeah.
am I already
Mm-hmm.
burned out and it's too late to take a couple rest days and
Right.
eat more?
Like
Yeah.
falling behind on nutrition. Like once you're
Yeah.
behind in a race, there's no going back. Yeah.
Yeah.
With burnout, usually, so the first thing I always suggest is rest and recovery.
Yeah.
And it's like, how much sleep did you get this past week? Let's double down on sleep. How are you feeling? How are stress levels? And so it's like, how can we take the foot off the gas pedal and maybe coast? We don't have to put on the brakes. But kind of, and it might be removing some tough like interval sessions. I can even use myself as an example because I'm always flirting with burnout, just
No,
as
no,
like
I call it
a
dancing around the volcano.
right,
That's
just like as a exactly as like an
feel the
anxious
heat.
achiever, like does all the things, right? So just last week I had a interval run, and I want to say it was 7 3 minute like hard efforts, like
Those are the
threshold.
hardest. Those are
And
the
I knew,
yeah.
I looked at it and I knew it was going to be tough and I knew I
Yep.
wasn't feeling it. But I was like,
Yep.
okay, like practice what you preach, Erin, do your thing. So, put on the running shoes, got my warm up in, did kind of a nice ramp up, started to get spicy. I was like, all right, let's see how this goes. Started the first 3 minute interval and it just sucked. Like I just couldn't. And I said to my coach, and this is the other thing on what athletes need to do is they need to communicate with their coach or the people in their inner circle, because then you need to respond. Because if you try to ignore it and be like, oh, I have to push through, this is the right thing. Like, no, training plans are never built around like life stressors that just happen to pop up unexpectedly. So
Right.
we have to adjust our training plans. So what I did is I tried the first interval and then I just called it. And it felt like I said to my coach, like a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum, but there wasn't a clear explanation as to what was happening or why. My body and brain were just like, nope, don't want to do it. You're done now. I hate this. And so
Did you not finish the workout?
and so what I did instead is, and I was probably 2 miles in, I walked back. It was a beautiful fall day. I turned off my music and podcast. I left my watch to record. And that's kind of like because I have a lot of people who will follow me on Strava and I want people to see, yeah, I'm doing
Mm,
12 or 13-minute miles.
right.
Cool. So to help kind of say, like, this is normal, this is okay. So I just walked 2 miles home and enjoyed the fall day. Still counted it as a workout. So then I commented to my coach and said, you know what? I'm flirting with burnout. Can we remove these threshold sessions for the next few weeks? My next race is in March, right? Like I
100% you
don't
can.
need fitness for this. Like I need
Yeah.
sustainability. And
Right.
so I said, could we instead do some kind of lower, slower pace, which for me, I said, could we do like 8:30 to 10-minute pace instead of these really spicy ones?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what she did. And so then this week I had one and it felt so good to hit the numbers and to get my green and training peaks. And
Hmm.
just that little lift in just a week made a big difference.
Yeah.
So if I would have forced myself to go through it, I would probably feel differently today, because I'd still be like, you know, hitting my head against a wall, forcing the issue and not recognizing that, I'm stressed. There's a lot going on. So
I'm hearing a lot of things in that. I'm hearing also that you took the agency and you talked to your coach, but then you also got another box to turn green, and that
yeah,
helped, you know?
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you still have that, like, as athletes, we want to feel like we're moving the needle,
Yeah.
and we don't like to feel like we've failed a workout or anything. And so, and one of the things I often say as a sports psychologist is like, we have to be realistic with our expectations. Because if we have unrealistic expectations and then we can't meet them, we always feel like we're falling short. And like, is that the relationship you want in sport or life? No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's okay to lower the bar and then reassess. And then you can start to push again when you're fully charged. Right? Mm-hmm.
And what if it's persistent?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So then it's going to be a longer, probably sit down with coach, um, and kind of reassessing. I think there's going to be a lot of self-reflection and
Mm,
asking yourself, like, why am I still pushing for this? Is how important is this to me? If it's persistent and someone has a race in like, 3 months, then it's going to be a big heart to heart of like, what are the next few months going to look like as you build up for this big event? And realistically, is that something that you want to do or are willing to do? And letting yourself decide it's okay to defer, for example. I've deferred for a number of reasons over the years, no regrets, right?
yeah.
And so I think that's something, if it's lasting a while, it's important to have that kind of heart to heart. For some people, they just want to like freedom. So another predictor of burnout is essentially a lack of autonomy. So you feel like you don't have a choice in the matter and you're just
Mm,
kind of like a cog in the system. And so when you give athletes autonomy again, it helps with that motivation. And burnout is essentially a motivation issue.
right.
So then you can say, like, okay, I need to mix this up. What do I want to do instead? And that can be really nice to kind of get some of that life back again. So a couple years ago, I guess almost 2 years ago, I was just burnt out from cycling. And so I stopped. I think you had a similar experience. And
Mountain bike
then,
racing. Yeah, I
yeah,
just put it down and started
I
doing
was like,
something
I need a
else.
break.
Yeah.
And then I started running again and it was great.
Yep.
And then I did a triathlon. And so it's
Yep.
mixing
Yeah.
it up can also, if it's lasting a long time, like you're still an athlete. But letting yourself dabble in other sports is also a really great idea.
Yeah, I mean, going on that bike packing hut to hut trip was so good for me
Great
because
example.
I am process oriented and I like
Yep.
to have a goal and I like doing hard things. I was just very burned out on chasing podiums and I felt like my identity was very tied up in that and I felt like other
Yes.
people's expectations of me were tied up in that
Yes.
and
1000%.
I felt trapped in this creation of my own doing that this
Mm-hmm.
is what I do and this is who I am and I must keep
Mm-hmm.
marching forward and
Mm-hmm.
whoo, that's a recipe for true burnout.
You nailed it. And the research supports that. So, I mean, we look at, excessive training loads are a predictor. Having really high like performance expectations. So that's the podiums that you noted and kind of this story in your head of like, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what people expect of me, whether or not they do, right?
Oh,
We
I know.
believe they
Mhm.
do, right? But then the other thing that's interesting is there's some research on like perfectionism.
Mm,
So perfectionists or kind of these like overachievers might be more prone to burnout because of those expectations that they place on themselves. And then the other thing that's really interesting is athletic identity. So when our athletic identity is really, really strong, we can be more vulnerable to burnout because we place more meaning on the quality of our training and our workouts and our performance. And our self worth can start to get tied to our performance. And so if training or performance is not going well, that takes a dip and then burnout can follow if it's not addressed.
well, then let's talk about what midlife and menopause do to that. Because
Right?
be,
Exactly.
because that's what I think I see
Yes.
sometimes. I actually see it a lot. And
All the
I
time.
relate to it
Yep.
because you have done A plus B equals C for a long time. You've
Yep.
fairly consistently known what athlete was going to show up and how that person was going to perform. And you hit a place where aging and hormonal chaos and all these kind of
Mm-hmm.
things convene, and it's not
It's not
the
working.
same as it
Yep.
was, and it's causing a lot of internal distress.
A lot of turmoil, a lot. Yep. And so one of the things I often see is that someone might be burnt out but it may be explained, and they're burnt out in the sense they've got all of the signs and symptoms, right? But a lot of it is explained by their perimenopausal adventure, we'll say,
Yeah.
right? And so it can be, I think one of the differences that I see, if I want to try to tease apart, is this burnout or is this perimenopause? One of the biggest differences is how much do they still want it? Like, how much do they still care about the sport in general? Because if they still find a lot of meaning and purpose in the sport and they still care a lot about their performance and showing up and they really want it to work, then it's more of a perimenopause thing and less of a burnout
Mm.
thing. And if they're not yet kind of cynical or detached or that kind of disillusioned or jaded, then that's also a sign that it's more perimenopause and less burnout. That said, a lot of the symptoms of burnout can be explained by perimenopause. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have a woman who's been doing A plus B plus C, and all of a sudden she's no longer feeling successful in sport because she's not performing in the way that she's used to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for lifelong athletes
Mm-hmm.
or those who have been racing or training for decades. We have standards for ourselves. We know what numbers we see, whether it's heart rate or watts or, pace or
Yeah.
whatever it is, whatever the weight is on the bar, right? And so if it seems like no matter what they do, they can't perform as well as they should, that can totally be explained by perimenopause,
Yeah.
because all of those symptoms are affecting their ability to perform as well as they should, right? So, and then another thing that can often show up is just feeling like, the time spent would be worthwhile, like they could be doing other things instead, kind of like this isn't working anymore. Why am I
Right.
wasting my time? But it's not working anymore because your body and your hormonal profile continues to
Mm-hmm.
change, and it's a moving target during this transition, right? And so then you also have to move your training with that, and that's really hard.
Oh, it is really hard. And also, clearly, if you're having issues that are stopping you from sleeping and stopping you from doing the things that
Yep,
really help with recovery, that
exactly.
is going to have a huge impact on both your mood and your physiological performance. So,
Exactly. Yep.
taking the time to, and this is where tracking can help, taking
Yes.
the time to make sure that you see the big rocks that you need to address
Yes.
and then working on that
Hmm.
too is, I think, can be a little motivating in itself because
Yeah.
you're at least working towards a goal. Like, I need to
Hmm.
address this sleep thing so I can get on top of this thing and feel better, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's a thing, it's interesting because it's like, it's not a lost cause. It's
Yeah.
like, it's
Oh
not that you
yeah.
have to stop being an athlete or you have to change your sport entirely, or even your training regimen. I'd argue that most folks going through this transition need to change their training regimen in the sense that they need to start prioritizing recovery and
Yeah.
nutrition more than they
Yeah.
have in the past. Right. But
100%.
but aside from that, like keep showing up, keep doing your thing. But let's start with sleep. And that could be, something as simple as like listening to podcasts about sleep or reading some books about sleep and learn like self-learning. Or it could be going to like a sleep psychologist.
Mm.
CBTI for CBT, it's called CBT
Yep.
insomnia, is very well based in we know it's very effective.
I've done shows on that. It is
Yeah.
it shows up in the research. It's
Yep.
extremely effective.
Yep.
And yeah, maybe I'll put a link to that in the show notes because she gave a free resource for
Oh, that's
that too.
wonderful.
Hmm.
Yeah, I highly recommend like see, and I'm not a like quote unquote CBT girly as a therapist. I don't
Hmm.
use a lot of CBT. But for sleep, it's great. It's really effective. So that might be something where it's like, okay, let's try these different levers and then reassess. And that's where that logging and journaling is so helpful because then you can see, are my other symptoms changing as I improve my sleep patterns or give
Right.
myself more recovery? Right.
And trying to tease out if it is perimenopause, keeping track
Mm-hmm.
of some stuff helps there too. When
Yep.
was your last period? What was it
Yes.
like? I mean, if you are cycling naturally and you're not on some sort of hormonal birth control,
Yep.
obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
also things like that low motivation. Do you also have anxiety? Do you have
Right.
other things that are not
Yes.
typical for you showing
Mm-hmm.
up
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that
And
are
that's
signs of,
where, yeah,
yeah.
like, and I think, and that's again, as we know too, like mood changes often come with perimenopause.
Hmm. Early
Right. And
indicators.
yeah. And is it because of sleep difficulties? It can be.
Yeah.
Or is it because of those hormonal differences and fluctuations? It can be, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's depression or anxiety, which we know
Right.
can overlap with perimenopause. And so then it can be, okay, for folks who are considering, HRT, okay, when your hormones kind of settle or are more consistent, then how does your mood change?
Mm-hmm.
If the mood isn't really changing and no matter what you're doing, you're still getting a lot of, just hopelessness, worthlessness, a lot of physical and emotional exhaustion, that can be a sign that it might be more of a depression thing or an
Mm.
anxiety thing. The things that are tough, like brain fog, concentration difficulties, are a depression symptom, but we all know that's also a symptom of perimenopause, right?
Right.
So then usually what I do, if it's kind of, I look to see, okay, well, what are the other symptoms that they may be having that are
Yep.
indicators of perimenopause? Yeah, how's your menstruations changing? How's your libido, which can also be a depression symptom?
Right.
Night sweats, hot flashes, how's your temperature regulation, right? And then on the depression side of things, we're looking at more of kind of like, are you feeling like this in all areas of life? Or is
Right.
it more just sport or your identity as an athlete because you can't train in the way you'd like? If they're feeling like a marked, like really diminished interest or pleasure in doing things they typically enjoy outside of sport,
Mm.
that's a red flag for me that it may be more of a depression thing. So let's say they love reading and they haven't been reading, they haven't picked up a book in 2 weeks. That's a
Yeah.
sign that something else might be going on. If they love, especially, getting outside in the garden and working on, whether it's spring or fall, right? This time of year is great for like, let's rework on the yard, where they're just avoiding it and they're not interested. They don't care. More of a depression thing. Um, Another thing that's interesting. So when we look at like nuances of like body composition,
Mm-hmm.
often we have body composition changes in perimenopause.
Mm-hmm.
Depression, one of the signs and symptoms is weight loss or weight gain. So to that question, I usually say, have you had changes in your appetite?
Mm.
Because people who are depressed are more likely to have appetite changes to coincide with weight loss or weight gain. Perimenopause, not so much, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually weight gain because of body composition changes,
Right.
not necessarily appetite or lifestyle behaviors. Mm-hmm.
Which also can
So
bleed into,
much.
yeah, and it
Yeah,
is a bit of a snake eating its tail situation here in
totally.
some ways,
Yes. Yeah.
because I've
Mm-hmm.
also seen within the group that you'll have someone who has always loved a sport, whether it be cycling or running, and now their body composition has changed.
Yep.
They feel sluggish, they feel slow. That is having a knockoff effect on their moods and then their
Yep.
motivation. That's not burnout. It is perimenopause.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also grief. Yeah, yeah, there's a
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. There's a thing called ambiguous loss or ambiguous
Mm,
grief. And it's this thing of kind of like grieving this thing that is still, or a person who is still technically there,
mm,
but your relationship with it has substantially changed. And so like athletic identity, it's kind of grieving what could have been or what was, and kind of
mhm,
coming to terms with like, this success may look different for me now. And that's really hard, right? And so then it's tricky because then, the snake eating its tail, let's say someone isn't getting the same benefits, they're not feeling the same benefits that they typically would with their training. Motivation really starts to tank. They're not training as often. That's then going to it could affect body composition. It's also going to affect mood and psychological well-being. It's going to affect stress management. So then it can become this cycle, which is, what you noted. Like it all really kind of blurs together. So then often I say, let's start with the basics. Sleep.
what do you mean by that?
Yep. Sleep, recovery. How are you doing for rest days? What are you doing on your rest days? Are you actually resting, or are you mowing the lawn, raking
That's
all of the
me.
leaves in the yard, going grocery
Cleaning the
shopping,
garage, doing
cleaning out the
everything.
garage, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so to that, I argue, like, you should feel quote unquote lazy on your rest days. Like, you need to rest.
Yeah.
And then are you eating consistently throughout the day? I'm not a dietitian, and I know that many dietitians will suggest every 3-ish hours, you should be eating something. Like we do best when we're fueled. Snacks, meals, what does that look like? So
How
that
much does low carbohydrate or low energy availability drive some of this, do you
I think it
think?
could drive a lot, especially with like cognition and
Mm-hmm.
thinking patterns and brain fog, right? So we know that, and there's been research on like when you're in a low energy availability state, you're not thinking as clearly. And so it's I think fueling is huge.
Hmm.
And we also know that it also affects how your body is able to recover. So if
Right.
you're not fueling consistently, then you may not be giving your body the opportunity to recover with what it is able to do
Hmm.
given your hormonal profile or fluctuations, right? So it's like, what are those little levers that are actually big ones? But those are the basics that we often kind of dismiss. Um, I often talk about like a mental taper. How can you take off stress?
Mm.
So, what are all of these other things that you're balancing in your life right now? Which ones can we delegate or eliminate or just neglect? And that's okay. So I'll often use the example of laundry. Like,
Yep.
can you just let it go for like a week or even 2 weeks? Do
Yep.
it.
Yes, you can.
Fine, do it. Right. The lawn,
Yep.
like, does it have to be mowed today? Can you call someone and have them do it for you? Well,
Yeah.
technically I could do it. Well, like having the capacity to do something or is like not the same as the capability to do something. You might be able to do all these things, but do you actually have the capacity? So that's
Yeah.
another thing. It's like mental taper. Let's like take off extra stuff from your plate. And that usually helps.
Yeah, let that go. There
Yeah.
was definitely a time when I can tell you when it was when I started training for Ironman,
Mm-hmm.
something 100% had to give, and I
Mm-hmm.
decided it was going to be a perfect house. It's just
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
that is just going to, not that it was ever perfect, but I just thought this is insanity. This is
Totally.
not a big priority in my life that my house looks like something out of a magazine. It's fine.
Right. Right.
And yeah, just
Yeah.
let it go.
You've got to be able to, yeah. And doing it intentionally makes it so much easier because then when you start falling behind, you're not going to guilt trip yourself in the same way. Cause like,
Yeah.
nope, I decided, right? Like, I decided I'm going to let this go. This is okay. This is fine.
Well,
So,
I think that my generation particularly, I know you're younger than I
mm-hmm.
am,
Mm-hmm.
really did. We grew up, Erin, with these ads of women with a frying pan and a business suit.
Totally.
Like,
And
I can
kids.
bring home the bacon,
Yeah.
fry it up in a pan, and
Yep.
never let you forget your man. Oh my
And then
God,
I
this
can make dinner for my family
I can do all
and
the things,
have a
and then I'll go
Pinterest
do an Ironman.
house.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then I think, and then my generation, I think, has gotten caught up in kind of this like girl boss hustle culture, rise and grind, kind of
Mm,
do it all. And I think we're starting to see more of this swing of like like let go of toxic productivity, let go of hustle culture. That's not cool anymore. We need to chill. And that's what I've been working more on. And I'll tell you, like this past summer was my least amount of volume I've ever done. And one of the best performances I've ever had in a triathlon. Like
completely believe
it's
that.
totally it's and and when you're doing it, it feels really uncomfortable because you've never done that. Like you're used to 10 or 20-hour weeks, but like let's try 6 and see what happens. And then what can you do with those
Especially
other
if you have a
hours?
base. You
Exactly.
can do that.
Yes.
Like a lifelong,
Yeah.
like years of base. You can
Yep.
100%. You
Yeah.
should probably do that, honestly, to give
Right.
your body this full reset. You'd be surprised what
Exactly.
happens.
Yep. Yep. And my base wasn't even as, I mean, I started, oh, that's probably 15 years ago.
That's
So
still,
compared to, I mean, compared to like I wasn't a collegiate athlete.
yeah,
Um, I dabbled in high school, but I wasn't consistently training until probably 2010. And so with that base, and it's been consistent, right? And I'll ebb and flow. It's very seasonal, just like it is for a lot of athletes. But that foundation got me so far. And so then it allows me, and I have to trust that foundation. And like that's
yeah,
hard with that hustle culture that we're in. And then I think a lot of women especially will just like, what am I doing wrong? Like we assume that we should do it all, but is that actually realistic?
right.
So yeah, it's
No.
it's tricky. So I think another thing that I do is I'll encourage athletes. Like I have this kind of fun framework that I use myself as well. Is that it called the scary, joyful, new framework. So pick one event that's kind of scary. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
push your limits in some way. It might be, if you're coming from mountain biking, it might be something like more technical. It might be like Margie Gessick in the
Mm-hmm.
UP, where it's just like really rowdy or gnarly. Or it might be like much longer distance than you've ever done. Or it might be going from long course triathlon to sprint and being like, I'm going to have a lot of really challenging workouts that I'm not used to doing because I'm a zone 2 queen. Right. So it's scary and then joyful. Pick something that you just love. So like an event that fills your bucket.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a fundraiser, doing something for charity. It could be just like a really cool community where, all the people you love are going to be there. It could be just like really great vibes where the race in general, like we've got a women's triathlon here in Minneapolis that is incredible. And I
Yeah.
saw only out of 800 some participants, I saw one triathlon bike. Plenty of
Wow.
bikes with like cargo, like crate, like milk crates on the back, and like run what you brung. Everyone is
That's awesome.
welcome. It's so cool. And then the last one is something new. So mix it up. Try a different discipline, different sport entirely. You
Yep.
know, go to the pickleball courts, like do something entirely different, because that'll also help with that motivation. Because the longer we're in a sport, we have to work exponentially harder to improve. And then that is also a burnout thing, right? So,
Yeah.
like, pick up something new and then you have that steep learning curve. You can
Oh,
start
that
to notice
beginner's
those
learning curve.
gains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it's like way more fulfilling, and that can kind of light the fire with you again. Right. I'd argue if you don't get that like boost with something new, then that's also more of a depression thing,
Mm-hmm.
because that's,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like your mood in general is just like not seeing the life around you.
Right. Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. I love all that. After I did Kona, I walked away from Ironman for 15 years. It was a
Yeah.
long time. I mean, I did
Yep.
other things. I mountain bike raced and all
Mm-hmm.
of that, but that was it. And
Mm-hmm.
then that one came to Penn State. It was a half, and I thought, that'd be fun again. And it
Right.
was. And then I was
Yep.
like, I'm good for a while again. I'm
Yes.
good for a
Yeah.
while again because it's so much
Yeah.
training. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's listening to those little things, like what are your little quirks as an athlete? Like do you like kind of adding notes in training peaks for your coach, and then all of a sudden you kind of go quiet? Like,
Hmm.
okay, what's brewing? Or do you love looking up new races and events and dreaming up trips that you're going to go on? And then all of a sudden you're not really doing those things anymore. Then that might also be a sign that something's brewing. So it's
Yeah.
often kind of looking for those like little things, and then stepping back and reflecting, like, is this still filling my bucket in the way that I'd like? And it's okay if it's not, just be intentional about it and then reflect. And so you can be purposeful with your training.
I wonder how much burnout is strictly preventable, or you just run
Mm-hmm.
into it. Do you know what I mean? Like for myself, I'm not sure I could have prevented it. I just saw it coming and it happened, and I thought,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. I mean, that ran its
Yeah.
course. I mean, that's sort of how I felt,
Yeah.
is that I had just run a course with something, and I was
It
done, and
was
I
time.
needed to pivot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. Because I think when you look at, what folks usually say about burnout prevention, it's essentially practicing moderation, which
Mm.
is really hard to do in this day and age.
And
Um,
with some sports.
especially sports that like go all year round, or
Hmm.
some of my athletes, like they're racing from February to November. Like
It's a
it's
long season.
all, and it's one of the reasons, because they're traveling
Hmm.
for different, right? But it's tough, and so I do think a lot of it is pretty normal. But at the same time, if you've been an athlete where you've been doing it for years without any like fluctuations in motivation, and then all of a sudden you feel like a wall has hit you, then it's like, okay, what's up? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Um, I think coaches are also getting a little bit better, just because there's more research now in understanding, like, the importance and the signs of burnout and how really it is a motivation thing. And it's okay that it happens. Like I remember
Yeah.
when I let go of, like, I was in the P12 field for a few years, crit racing and doing kind of the road scene. And it just like so hard to explain, but I was just done. I was like, nah, this just isn't it anymore. And I had a heart to heart with my coach and telling him, like, it doesn't make sense for me to continue with you as a coach, because I'm just not interested in these events anymore. And he had such a wonderful response because I was worried about telling him. I felt like I was failing or like letting him
Mm,
down. And I'd been with him for probably 5 years. And he said, it's just a new season of life. That's okay. It happens. It happens to all athletes. And it was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. It's not that I needed permission, but I needed some sort of validation because I was feeling
mhm.
so kind of lost and aimless, which is super normal for that burnout.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just time to change. That's okay.
Is there anything that we haven't covered on this that you thought in preparation that we should talk about?
I think one of the things that probably is important, and especially knowing kind of the feisty community and the hit play not pause community, is like, well, what do you do? Especially when talking to healthcare providers, like where do you start?
Hmm.
And so I think like I encourage people to kind of have an interdisciplinary team. And if you've got, and that team could include, create your own adventure depending on time, bandwidth, resources, etc. It could include a dietitian to make sure, even if it's just a few sessions, like let's check
Yep.
the fueling. How are we doing?
How's your
Um,
iron?
exactly. Right. Yeah.
Could be some
Um,
underlying thing that you haven't even.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Having it could be a therapist, a sports psychologist, someone to help with just like the mental and emotional turmoil. Again, it could be something as like 5 to 8 sessions could be all you need for a little bit of a boost. Obviously, a physician who has expertise or a healthcare provider with expertise in perimenopause, so you can check hormones and other signs and symptoms to see if there's anything you can do there. But and then your coach, if you have one. The thing that not a lot of people do is ask those 4 people, for example, to communicate with each other.
Mm,
Interdisciplinary care can be a game changer. And I can't tell you how many calls I've hopped on with the athlete or just with the provider to be like,
really?
hey, this is what I'm seeing. So I'm thinking we may need to adjust training. What are your thoughts as coach? Or talking to like a physician and say, hey, I'm seeing these signs and symptoms. Is there like a physiological explanation for this? This isn't typical for her. And those calls make your care so much better because all of your providers are on the same page, rallying to support you. So it's like, it's
How do you
okay to
set
ask
that
that.
up?
Yeah. I mean, just ask them.
Okay.
And if it's a licensed healthcare professional, like an MD or a licensed therapist or sports psychologist, all we do is we'll send a release of information to
Okay.
like, we'll have you sign a
Right.
ROI
Of
with their
course.
contact info. Coaches technically don't need it, but some might ask for it anyway. And then that allows us to essentially break confidentiality and
Right.
communicate about our care. And then usually what we'll do is we'll either email and find a time to hop on a call or a Zoom virtual call. And sometimes the athlete joins and sometimes they don't, depending on the circumstances. So, and in general, providers are sometimes we're hard to pin down.
Yeah.
But we care so deeply about all of our patients and clients, we'll move mountains to make it happen.
Yeah, that's a great
Mhm.
idea
Yeah.
because you are 100% correct. In our everyday life, our providers, our cardiologist doesn't always talk to our OB-GYN, doesn't
Hmm.
always talk to, and there's a lot of,
Yep.
or there
Yep.
can be important information that slips between the
Yeah.
cracks.
Yeah. I think psychiatrists or, like nurse practitioners who specialize in just psychiatry and psych meds can also be really helpful,
Hmm.
especially for any, folks listening who have a history of like depression and anxiety and have been on meds for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Things can change in perimenopause. And so
Right.
having them on standby and reassessing can be really helpful.
Yeah.
But then again, they understand the nuances that like a therapist doesn't. And so then when they're all communicating, they're all like learning and able to better support their client or their patient. So that's always, yeah, it's always really helpful. I love it. So, and I haven't had experiences where people just like ghost me or refuse or anything like that. They'll make it happen. So,
Yeah, that's great.
mhm, yeah,
That's a great idea.
yeah. And then I think my final piece of advice is ask for referrals. It's like if you don't know where to start with like a
Mm.
dietitian or like someone who quote unquote gets it, ask one of your providers because often they have folks in their network, in the community or in their circle, whatever it is. I'm providing referrals for other like mental health therapists all the time.
Mm.
And so that's another thing is like, don't hesitate to ask your providers if you're looking for someone to kind of like complete your healthcare team. Again, it doesn't have to be like a forever thing. It might just be a few
Right.
sessions with someone for a nice booster, or like CBTI, right?
Right.
If you want to target insomnia, if you and you have a therapist, ask them. Be like, hey, I've heard about
Mm.
this. Do you think it would be helpful for me to do this? And see what they say. And then they might be able to provide a warm handoff and referral, and then you
Yep.
have less time listening to elevator music, figuring out what buttons to press to get a hold of a person, right? So it's more human. It's so cheesy.
Yes, and
But
when you are in it, that is a
exactly,
huge barrier to care.
huge. Yeah. Because people will say, oh, find a therapist, or, you talk to your primary care provider about
Yeah.
HRT, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't know where to start, or this healthcare system's great. Well, that healthcare system has 250 providers. Like, I don't know who's going to be a good fit for me.
Totally.
So ask the people who know you, and then
Yeah.
they can also help you kind of get in with the right person, because we also know how important fit is when it comes to
Hmm.
client care. If you feel like you can listen, or the other person listens, if you feel like they get you, that's going to make your care much better. So
Yeah.
find someone who you like.
Yeah, I agree with that. And along those lines, plug into your community, because
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk to each other about it. I think,
yeah.
like the Hit Play Not Pause community is a great example of that. It's just like, what are others doing here?
Yeah.
Like any suggestions, any resources, because you're not in it alone. And I think
Never.
that's another, it's not about you and what you're doing wrong. It's a season of life, and it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. But I always say, as athletes, we're signing up for more highs and lows in life because we care so much about our sport.
Yeah.
And so this might be one of those lows. It doesn't mean like it's going to be like that forever. So you can, seek help for sure. Seek social support is huge. And then I'm also a huge proponent of mindfulness meditation, which we haven't
Mm.
talked a lot about, but that just helps a lot with the stress management and emotion regulation. So you don't
Hmm.
get hooked by thoughts and feelings when your hormones are especially chaotic. So
Right.
that can also be a game changer, is just getting like Headspace app or a mindfulness
Mm.
app. And that could
Hmm.
be like 10 minutes a day. The biggest thing that I say about that piece is like the purpose of meditation is not for your mind to go blank and for
Right.
you to de-stress. Um,
Right.
the purpose is you're going to get distracted, and you notice when you get distracted and you bring yourself back. And so every time you bring yourself back, that's like a rep.
Yep.
And so then when you're driving and someone cuts you off in traffic, you don't have a quick response or reaction in the same way that you might. So
Right.
then you can be like, oh, that wasn't a great idea, and then carry on. So you
Yep.
get better at letting those things go. So that's a free performance enhancer, and frankly, enhancer for quality of life and psychological well-being.
Yeah. That is all excellent advice. I
Lots of
might
stuff.
also, yeah, lots of stuff. We could go on and on. I mean,
Yeah.
as we were
Yeah.
talking, I also think giving yourself a well spaced out calendar, because post
Mm-hmm.
event letdown is real,
Yeah.
and you don't just want to put yourself on an endless roller coaster
Yep.
of,
Yep. Yeah.
yeah,
So I say, get curious, track, just like you
yep,
suggested, having a mood tracker, symptoms tracker. Pay attention, do that for like a month, if you can. And that's going to give you a lot of really great information. And your providers can help you understand it. And they can also pick up on little patterns and nuances that you may not. So
right,
if you're not sure where to start, I say start tracking, and then
yep,
start making some phone calls. Because there are people
excellent.
out there.
Mhm. Great advice as always. And
Cool.
I will talk to you again in the future about exercise addiction. So stay tuned for
Yes, that's
that.
going to be a good one too. Yeah, great topic. So thanks to everyone who suggests these. They're great. So
Awesome. Well, thanks
cool.
so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's our show. Come on back next week for our final show before the holiday break for a conversation with ultra endurance cyclist Paula Ralph, who earlier this year cycled 12,290 kilometers from Cape Town to Norway, and she set out to break a record. But in the end, after endless mechanical mishaps, being hit by a truck in Zambia, and just soldiering on despite reroutes that made the record impossible, came home with something more lasting. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.